I've been waiting for this because I've been waiting a long time to actually get to review this vehicle. And that's mainly because it's one of the few that I actually can review within the household. This is a 2020 Ford Explorer XLT. So today we're going to figure out why this vehicle is so adored by mothers all across the country, and actually why it might actually be a good fit for most of us who are not yet parents, but are still looking to haul our friends around wherever we need to go. I'm Sergio. This is not my vehicle. Welcome to the Sergio Show. Alright, so first a brief history of the Explorer. This is the 6th generation of the Ford Explorer, which has been in production since the 90s. My family actually has quite a history with the Ford Explorer. This is actually the 3rd Ford Explorer that we actually buy. We first had a 1st generation Ford Explorer, then we had a 3rd, and now this, our 3rd Ford Explorer, is the latest 6th generation Ford Explorer, which launched for the 2020 model year. Yeah, what a chaotic year to launch a new car, isn't it? But this car is actually full of quite a bit of cool stuff, quite a lot of practicality, and so much more. And I'm actually really excited to show you guys around it because I've actually been wanting to for quite some time, but I barely got the opportunity now. So now that we do have the chance, we're gonna start things off in the way that only the man, the myth, the legend, Soft Kylo Ford could. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in, start her up, and let her run. If the key fob for some reason you don't feel like using it, you can also use the keypad over here, which is something exclusive to Ford vehicles, but just something I thought I'd point out. We'll start up front with these daytime running lamps right over here. These are actually really thin, but they do a pretty good job of running during the day. They're actually pretty bright. I'll actually hit the unlock again, and there you have it. That orange light that just lit up right over here, that was the turn signal, which is also LED. You have the same setup over here. You have the daytime running lamp up here, the turn signal, and then these two are your nighttime headlights. Down here, we have fog lamps and fake vents, which, you know, it's actually not entirely fake. You do have a pass-through over here, which leads around to the back of the front fascia and into the front tire. I'm honestly not sure exactly what it would do for aerodynamic purposes, but it's there, and at least it complements the front fascia of the vehicle pretty neatly. I do have to admit, I think this is definitely a better looking Explorer than certainly the previous generation. Not that that was a bad looking vehicle, but this just definitely takes a step up above. Speaking of Explorer, here we have it written down. Keep an eye on this because we will be seeing this more throughout the video. These mirrors actually have a nice little light down here, which they do turn on at night. They probably turn on during the day as well, however you can't really see it, of course, so there's that. You have a nice trim over here, looks pretty neat. You have 5-spoke rims right over here, which look nice, and they are wrapped in hand-cooked tires, so that's pretty neat. This is, again, the XLT trim, which is supposed to be the middle trim. We'll actually come around to the back of the vehicle, and here you have it, XLT back here. This is typically one of the more popular trim levels for the Ford Explorer, as it does contain, basically, it's like the middle ground, so to speak. Backlights. We have this massive LED backlight. This is not only your brake light, but it also doubles as your turn signal when you enable. Actually, no, I'm wrong. This is your brake light. This is your turn signal. Excuse me. Once again, Explorer back over here with the nice little Ford badge right here. You can actually see yourself if you look closely enough. I can see myself. I think that's pretty neat. You have EcoBoost down here, which that has to do with the powertrain we'll get to shortly. We just got passed by a modified Toyota Corolla, not the GR trim, however. I wonder if anyone in my household, or I mean in my neighborhood, has one of those. Overall, the exterior of the Ford Explorer looks pretty damn good. At least that's my humble opinion about it. It's wrapped in red, so keep that in mind for sure. Up top, however, before we get into the interior of the vehicle and the mechanics and all that, we do have these as standard, so you can hook up maybe a surfboard or whatever it is, snowboarding if you like that as well. You can put all those things up there. It's not really all that huge, however, these inner passings. Over here, they're certainly a little bigger, but they're not that huge. So you might be able to insert like locks in there, which will help. Just, you know, just something to keep note. Now, in the back of the vehicle, we actually have this nice little rear wing. It definitely reminds me of the GR Corolla, even though this is older than the GR Corolla, of course. We have our top brake light up here, which aids these two brake lights over here. I think it's time we jump to the engine of the vehicle now. Now, before you can get into the engine of the vehicle, you actually have to get into the engine itself. And to do that, first, we got to get inside the vehicle. And actually, there's a pretty neat trick to do it, which a lot of cars today do have, but the Ford Explorer definitely has it as well. You have a keyless entry fob over here. So all you have to do is keep this in your pocket, and you can actually, or hold it, and there you go. You have just unlocked the vehicle. So let's take a look inside real quick. Something I love about Ford vehicles, especially the newer ones, is these screens. They have nice little splash screens for when you start the vehicle, or at least put it in accessory mode, that type of good stuff. I'll show you more about that when we actually dive into the interior of the vehicle. Like I said, we're going to jump into the engine first. So you pull down here twice, and you are all set to go. Now let's take a look at the engine. You're looking at a 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder. This one actually has a turbocharger attached to it. And in this vehicle, it puts out 300 horsepower and roughly 310 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 is set to be around 7 seconds, which for a big 3-row SUV isn't so bad. However, this is actually the base engine for the Ford Explorer. There is a turbo V6 option available as well if you opt for the Explorer ST trim. That said, if you opt for this 4-cylinder, you're actually getting the same engine that is shared across various Ford products, including the Ford Mustang, both 6th generation and the upcoming 7th generation. So that said, over here, as I mentioned, it's 300 horses versus the Mustang's 310 and even 330. And I'm still left wondering about the 7th generation Mustang, but we'll have to wait and see. That said, this vehicle weighs roughly 4,300 pounds. That's my guesstimate. It's roughly around there. Which means fuel economy with this vehicle isn't terrible, but also isn't great. You're looking at 21 miles per gallon combined with this vehicle and this engine configuration. So definitely keep that in mind if you're looking for a vehicle like this. Fuel economy isn't exactly the greatest. It's also not a weakness, however. All right, now let's move back inside the vehicle. Like I mentioned, there is keyless entry. So let's hop on in. Like I mentioned, you do have a very nice splash screen. I really like that Ford does this, to be honest. It's something that you don't see from too many vehicle makers. I know there's a few others to do it, but I always like Fords. Now, the XLT trim from 2020 actually has push button start, so we're going to put it in accessory mode for the time being, and let me show you the splash screens as I do so. So full accessory power active. So the gauge cluster actually has various different screens that you can adjust. You start off with the calm screen. That's how I have adjusted it. Whenever I'm driving this vehicle, I like to use the calm screen, but on occasion, I also like to use the audio screen, which is this one over here, which tells you what music is playing, whether that's a radio station, or if you have your phone connected, it shows you what music is playing there as well. You have your fuel economy page, which right now is rated at 19.3. Like I mentioned, the average is about 21 miles per gallon, so not too bad, not too bad. Tire pressures is also shown here. You have your seat belts, your auto start stop, which this vehicle does have, and again, your audio screen. You can adjust it by going to the display setup. You can also adjust your speedometer, which if you're in Europe, you can use kilometers, or if you just like using kilometers, you can do that as well. So there's that. There's various other settings, including the select screens, which is where you can change up what screens you want to see, including an off-road screen, which I mean, you could use it if you really wanted to, but at least I don't really suggest it in this vehicle, to be honest. You have an eco coach as well, which again, more about the fuel economy and all that good stuff. Your audio, your phone, your basic settings, your display setup. So over here, all you can really see is your oil life, which as of filming is 70%. Pretty neat. So this screen actually complements these two gauges over here, which I think look nice. And over here, you do have your gear selector and what setting you have, because over here, you do have a rotary dial. Yeah, you do have a rotary dial. However, in direct sunlight, this can actually be kind of tricky to see. I covered it so it's easier to see, but in direct sunlight, it actually can be hard. So you have it over here as a secondary way to see it, which I think is pretty neat. Over here, you have an 8-inch infotainment screen. It is touchscreen. That is my mistake, folks. I did not do it. So you can also adjust your apps, your phone, and you have other settings over here. Something very interesting about this screen is the display. You can adjust the background, but it can only be in one of these four. You can change it to day and to night mode. Here's a brown, like a blackish screen. You have a blue screen. You have a darker blue screen, which looks pulled out of the Ford GT supercar. And then you have a basic blue screen. Basically, as long as it's blue, you can have it as your wallpaper. That's all I'm trying to say here. You can also turn a calm screen on in case all that infotainment is too much for you. You can change it to this. This is actually how I had it the day of my driving exam. So that does help. Anyway, you can also touch the screen just to kick it back into a regular screen. Same thing if you turn off the display, just touch it and you're good. So it's a pretty adjustable screen. And actually, this vehicle does have Apple CarPlay as standard. However, you do need a cable for that. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be connecting your phone to it. I know a lot of people in my generation, myself included, actually will be. I certainly do whenever I drive this vehicle. In other news, we have nice big storage areas over here. A nice center console storage, which you can actually take this out as well if you need even more space to stuff bigger items. There's a lot of space in here. We're going to throw this in here. You have cup holders. You have plenty of space over here. Overall, I like the driving position of this vehicle. I think it looks pretty neat. I like this view. Nice mirrors over there. If there is something I'm not too fond of, and Car and Driver does agree apparently, it's that, you know, you don't have exactly the greatest materials over here. You have some plastics, which, you know, at like the $40,000 range that this vehicle sits in, it's not terrible, but it could be better, you know. The Explorer ST definitely has some nicer materials and all that, but, you know, that's just what you get when you pay for the Explorer ST. I mean, XLT in this case. Steering wheel. Feels pretty neat. I've always liked, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I have always liked this type of horn padded design. I think it's neat. It feels nice in the hand. You have some buttons over here, your cruise control, cancel. You can, your music controls over here, your menu button to adjust the center screen there. You have some paddle shifts that are used to connect to the 10-speed automatic transmission attached to our engine. You can actually shift into manual mode with the engine by pushing this M button over here or by using the paddle shifters. I will say this though, this transmission is kind of clunky, so I honestly don't really like to use the paddle shifters. I would much rather let it do its own thing. Just my 2 cents, however. Up here we have some nice looking mirrors. Hello there. And you have this over here as well. Overall, the cabin, at least the driver's... Oh, and you can actually detach it. Don't worry, it's not broken. There you go. Overall, the cabin, the driver's cabin of this vehicle is pretty damn neat. I think it's time to fire it up. the middle screen in between the gauges actually changes modes, changes colors and shape when you change the driving modes. So there's a bunch of different drive modes here. We are currently in normal. Now we're in slippery mode, which looks like this, and it has a very nice little like blue grayish background. Then you have trail, which looks like this, and it does turn off your traction control, so keep that in mind if you're going to be going off-road. And it also leaves these nice little details off to the side with some grass and rocks. I think it's pretty cool. You can also switch it over from slippery, normal, eco mode, which looks like this. Has a nice leaf to it, and it shows more of a greenish gray type of background. This typically is the most efficient mode, so whenever you need it, you can kick it into that. The least efficient though is sport mode, which is this one over here. In my opinion, this has the coolest looking middle screen. However, it does use up plenty of fuel for the average driver. And lastly, there's tow haul, which looks like this, and it's self-explanatory, to be honest with you. But those are your multiple drive modes in the vehicle, and it's plenty. And I think these little graphics when you change drive modes, I think that's really cool. All right, with the engine note sample aside, let's move on to the middle and back seats of the Explorer. So here we are in the second row of the Explorer XLT, which actually has plenty of space, including some pockets behind the driver and passenger seat up front. You do have some climate controls over here. I have turned off the accessory mode because it kind of smells like gasoline in here after revving the engine a little bit for you guys. You do have a USB-A and USB-C and a 12-volt connection. So you have 3 connections over here, so you can plug in whatever you want. What it doesn't have is a household style charger. So that's just a little bit of a downside. It would be nice to have, but you don't have it here. You have some nice lamp lights over here, which you press with the button in order to adjust it. You have some climate controls up here, which again, rear passengers can adjust using the center console. Over here, you have a walkthrough. Now you can get the the second row with 3 seats if you really wanted to, but if you don't, then you have this center passway through which you get 2 cup holders, some nice space over here for, I don't know, maybe a couple of Hot Wheels diecast, a Ford Shelby GT500, and a Mustang Mach-E 1400, which barely even fits in there. I'd rather recommend that you put it over there, you know, just for safety. Here we have a 12-volt battery charger and hand sanitizer. Fits perfectly in here, actually, with the Shelby GT500. So it goes to show just how much space you actually have in this vehicle. And if that's not enough, you actually have a little gap over here where you can maybe throw in your charging cables when you're not using them. And then you can just plug them in over here when you are. Lastly, the third row, which we have 2 bags portraying small children over here. It's kind of cramped. I'm actually going to try jumping into this third row over here. Let me just switch camera views. Okay, I'm in the third row right now, and I have plenty of headroom, so that's pretty good. And my knees are actually, there's some room between my knees and the second row seats. But here's the thing, I measure at 5'5", so someone at 5'7", 5'8" and above might actually have a little trouble. And you better hope that your passenger ahead of you has plenty of room over there. Because if this is all the way back, you might actually have some trouble getting into this back seat. This is definitely more so meant for younger children, especially on long trips. Believe me, I've actually sat back here during road trips because we have had bigger passengers sitting up front. It can be kind of uncomfortable for hours on end. So just something to keep in mind. But that's my fault also because I am a third row enthusiast. I love third rows, especially in a vehicle like this. Meanwhile, however, on the subject of the third row, you have a cup holder, a little bit of room over here. You have some extra storage space over here, which you might want to throw. That's like enough space for like a first aid kit or something. We have our bags for trained children, another cup holder, and actually over here you have a secondary 12-volt battery charger and a nice little light to complement it. It's over here. All right, there you have it. That's the ins and outs of the Ford Explorer. So how much is it going to cost you? This one, as tested, was around $40,000, roughly like 41, 42, give or take. There is a base trim which goes for around 35, 36, around there. The higher trims like the ST and the Platinum will go for 60 and above. So just something to keep in mind if you're going to be shopping around for one of these. You are getting plenty for the money though, if you ask me. It's a pretty cool vehicle to finally be able to review, and I hope you guys enjoyed said review. All right, there you have it. That is your review of the 2020 Ford Explorer XLT. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you'd like to see more car reviews, then definitely keep me posted. I think I'd like to do some more, so we'll see how that goes. But with that, thank you all for watching, and be kind. See you next time.